So Chanel, 5 years ago today was the first day of lockdown. Can you remember that?
I actually do. One, because you sent me a photo that reminded me of how I had a very small baby, 3 months old, and everything seemed super uncertain. So I actually think back, there's so many very distinct memories around uncertainty. Everything is not normal. Everything is not going to go the way I thought it was going to go. How do I socialize a child when I'm in lockdown? How do we get food for a baby in lockdown? So many things that were going through my mind. So I actually do remember quite distinctly how I was feeling at that point in time.
It was a strange time. I think the first couple of days were exciting and then it became a drag. I remember we were sitting at work the day before the lockdown started, thinking, we'll be back in 3 weeks. We never went back. Never. And that was a strange thing. It was an uncertain time, but probably the time in recent history that we were the most adaptable because we were forced to do it. And everybody just went into it and we did it.
I think that links very strongly to what we wanted to talk about today, which is around what is your default setting. We were forced to switch off our default setting and to adapt, like you said, and find new ways and different ways of surviving and looking after ourselves, looking after our bodies, looking after our people, and just responding to the general uncertainty that was in the world at that point in time.
And the world's not less uncertain now. It's different, but still, it's never been the same again, and it never will be. So we are still in a place where we need to constantly be adaptable to find a new way of doing. So what I wanted to talk about today, let me give you an intro. You can tell me what you think about this. It's from a book called Reset by Dan Heath. Fantastic book. Even his brother, they write excellent books. And he spoke about asking yourself. So now we're at the end of March, at the end of the first quarter of the year. Most people have goals for the year. Maybe you are progressing well towards your goals. Maybe you're not. You're feeling like it's not happening. So maybe it's a good time to reassess your approach. And what he speaks about is asking yourself, what is the goal of my goal? And he uses a really cool story about an Australian mom that during COVID was quite ill as a result of the virus. She had breathing issues. And then she also got breast cancer in the same period. And her health was in a poor way. And she had chemotherapy and all sorts of concerns. And she said during that time that she wanted to focus on her health in order to lose weight so she could fit into the clothes she fit in before. And she wanted to just be in general better shape. And the interviewer or the person working with her asked her, why is this an important goal? And she said, because I want to be the best possible mom. And then they said, so if you forgot the initial path, the fitness and the training and the losing weight, what are 10 other ways that you can focus on to be a better mom? And that's a brilliant question, because what she said was, she gave specific examples. Before she became ill, they had more fun at their house. They played more music. They did more specific things together. And she realized that getting healthy was not the only way she could be a fantastic mom. So what they did was they started buying large Lego sets, which they built together. She has 2 kids, small kids. They started playing board games because she was ill, and as a result of the chemo, she would throw up and she would be feeling poorly. But she still could do that. And they bought cool rocking chairs to sit on the veranda on the stoop outside, and they would sit together and they would look at whatever they could see from there. And the impact was spending a lot more quality time with her small kids, being a better mom. But it wasn't only through the initial route that she thought that's the only way to do it. And I thought that was a fantastic idea, because we get stuck in, that's the only way that I'm going to reach this goal. That's the only way that I'm going to progress towards this. And then that follow-up question of, forget about that. What are 10 other ways you could do this? That's a cool thing to ask yourself.
It links so strongly to a conversation I was having early on in the week around critically thinking about things, thinking outside the box, coloring outside the lines was actually the conversation that we were having, and how I think the way we conditioned from very young age, being in school, having a set, standard routine in school, having to color between the lines, having to write a specific way, having to do your math calculations in a specific way for it to be right, has indoctrinated a lot of us to think that there's only one right way. And I think most of the people that we can look up to as baanbrekers, as people who have really set the tone in terms of innovation and creativity, are people who have gone in a different route. They didn't do the default. They did things differently. And I'm not bashing the school system, and I'm not bashing routine, and I'm not bashing having a specific way, because there are things that should be done a specific way. But I think it's about having that balance between, when things aren't working, are we resilient enough to be able to detach our identity from what we're doing and try something different? Because I think it often links to our identity and how we think that the only way that I can be successful, the only way that I can show growth, the only way that I can be a good mom, a good leader, a good manager, is by following the default setting. And that links very strongly, we know, to our identity. And it's hard to sometimes step away from that. But being able to do that and being resilient in that is actually what's going to enable us to make waves and do things better.
Adaptability is an aspect of resilience that is overlooked. We typically think of resilience as something goes wrong, I can bounce back. But bouncing back in a different way and trying something different, that is not something that we typically think of. And taking a different way, thinking, what if the first 5 things that I tried didn't work? What's the 6th one? That is what typically makes people succeed in what they do. So I like the idea of asking yourself, what is the goal of my goal? If your goal is to lose weight and get healthier because you are unhealthy, you can't really change that goal. That's the goal of your goal. But you will only get to the bottom line if you ask yourself, is there something behind what I'm trying to achieve? And
But
what are the different
why?
ways? But why?
But
Yes.
why? Yeah.
A really good question.
And I think so many people have spoken about it, but really repeating the question why until you really don't find another why is a nice way of doing that. I've often said, okay, why? And usually by the 5th or the 6th why, you get to the real crux of the matter.
To the bottom.
Yes. And I think it counts in different areas, right? So we're speaking very specifically about being resilient in our approach to things, or being adaptable in our approach, or trying different or new things. But I think it links also very strongly to our emotions and understanding why we feel a certain way about certain things as well. So I know in Brene Brown's book, she often speaks that we have very poor language to explain what we're experiencing or how we're feeling about specific things. And by actually asking ourselves again, why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling this? We can actually get back to what the crux of the matter is, and then we can really do something about it. But we often take a symptomatic approach to challenges, to finding solutions, to identifying and becoming more self-aware. We're very symptomatic about it because it's quicker and it's efficient, we think, but it really isn't. We always speak about going slow to go fast. I think that's very much it.
Yep. So if your plan is working, keep following that plan. But if you find yourself at a place where it's not working anymore, ask the question, what is actually the goal of this goal? Is there maybe a better, more underlying goal? And then ask yourself, what are 10 possible ways of doing this differently? That will get you unstuck, I'm sure of it.
I also think so, but I also think you don't have to do it on your own. So, and I want to throw that in because I think I'm that kind of person that likes being very independent and finding the solution and being really proud of myself when I do. But I often make things so difficult for myself because I should actually be able to say, I know of someone who can help me think about this. I
Yes.
trust this person to understand my background, to understand who I am, and to understand my purpose, my why, where I'm going. And I trust that they'll help me find a better solution or help me think about the solution a little bit differently. And sometimes it's actually going to the person that you least expect to get a good solution from because they think differently than you do.
Yep. And if you could figure it out on your own, probably already would have.
Yeah.
But you are thinking in a very, all of us, in a specific way.
Yeah.
Somebody can just bring a different angle, like, have you thought of this? And often it's such a simple thing, makes a massive difference. So yes, that's another important overlooked aspect of resilience is having other people to turn to, because we think that we should be the ones that need to be able to figure everything out. And
Yes.
often, most of life we can't do on our own. It's too bloody challenging.
Definitely. I think as a last point on figuring things out and making plans, I think we sometimes get stuck in the why it's not working rather than the what is working. And being grateful for the opportunity to try something different or to try something new. And I think that's another thing that I like to link to resilience is gratitude. Being able to notice what is working, because it's unlikely that everything is going wrong at the same time. There has to be one thing that you can
Yes.
say, this is
That's
good.
working, yes.
And even if it's not optimal, it's working. And I think that's the thought that I just really want to end maybe our discussion off on is be grateful and look for the things that are working as well. Don't overlook them. And potentially by being more grateful, you'll be more open to seeing opportunities for doing things differently in other areas.
That's a really cool quick chat.
Thank you. Good insight.
Like
Okay.